Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Kansas City-based alto saxophonist, composer, and educator Christopher Burnett. This is our second interview during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it took place on December 17th, 2020. We covered a lot of great jazz ground. Primarily, we discussed his fourth album as a leader, titled CBQ Plus 5, Standards Volume 1, on his Artist Recording Collective, ARC label. This album of mostly post-bop compositions will be released in January 2021. He recorded the album under the brilliance of producer Bill Crain at BRC Audio Productions in Kansas City with a collection of stellar Kansas City musicians. We talk about this, the pandemic, his students, hope for the future, and so much more in between. Dig this interview.
Up front, I want to thank you for taking a minute out. It's always a joy to be able to catch up with you and talk with you. And you're such a practitioner of this music and the youth and our community and all of that. It's always so great to see new albums and cats like Lonnie opening up the Reno Club and all of that, because no matter what happens, I was talking to somebody the other day that said, I don't want to look back at 2020 and see anything that I wasted a year. So you've always been very forthright with what you're doing. You have a brand new album coming out, so thank you for what you're doing for jazz, and it's always a joy to have you on the show.
Oh man, it's an honor to be on the show, and I appreciate the encouragement, because that's what it is to me. It's a lot of encouragement that what I'm trying to do adds a positive element into everything. I mean, and that's I don't think anybody does jazz music to try to be famous or anything. I think we do it because we have to. That's who we are. And documenting is one of the things that, if you're a recording artist, you do that, and composer, things like this. The band that is on that album is the band that I had when I had the year residency at Black Dolphin. Yeah. So we were playing all of that music the first Saturday of every month, and it's a good group. And then we did, Bill Richardson had us come up to Northwest, Dr. Bill Richardson at Northwest Missouri State, and we were the featured artists for the Jazz Festival, where they bring in a bunch of high school and college bands to play. And I was the educator, the clinician. I gave a clinic and everything else. That was a big honor. And he wanted our group to play because I guess he had heard us. And of course, it's a group of people who I've been playing with for 20 years now. Roger Wilder, Clarence Smith, Bill McCamey, Charles Gachet on guitar. It's a group of leaders and all-stars and instant experienced cats. And at this point in my life, I was really lucky, I think, that cats of that caliber were into my vision for what I wanted to do. Because, most people don't want to play standards now. They want to play original things, and they're just above standards. But for me, I'm 65 now. This year I turned 65. And that was the music that really motivated me. I was alive, and I was 4 years old in 1959, the year that jazz was said to be really a big deal, and all the things that went on in 1959, Giant Steps, Mingus album, Kind of Blue, all of that. So that was the music that basically I heard growing up. And then I grew up in the era of the civil rights movement. I saw that growing up. I was a kid alive when all of these seminal figures were walking on the planet, and some of them were assassinated, things like that. I remember that thing. And, yeah. So the music is a soundtrack to me that is different than even bebop. Bebop was a different soundtrack. I think it was I get a different feeling when I hear bebop played than I do when I hear the modern jazz of the era that I'm talking about, like the Maiden Voyage, things like this, Kind of Blue music, those types of tunes. So it really means something to me, and I wanted to document, for posterity eventually, because, like, I'm 65, and I think I play and write better than I ever have in my life. I'm still pretty strong physically and everything. I don't have any health issues, knock on wood, thank God, But, there's a time when you get older, you lose that no matter how good you are, no matter how great of a musician you are, you lose something. And I right now I'm still playing better than I ever have. And I think the record came out really nice. And a lot of that goes to the musicians, of course, and the music, but the studio, man, Bill Crain, I think that people don't realize what they have here with that cat, man. I mean, his studio is probably the best studio I've ever recorded in. And then he's probably one of the best album producers anywhere. We had him produce the album and had Stan Kessler be the session producer. Those guys are very experienced, and I knew Stan wouldn't let us waste time. And that way I could concentrate on the overall artistic production of things and the vision that I wanted for the record. But Bill, the way he made the album sound is exactly the way that I like a jazz record to sound. If you listen to the samples I sent you, the final mix, the private link, if you had a chance to listen to any of that, you heard a group that the instrument sounded acoustic. There wasn't a bunch of reverb any place. There wasn't, the mixing, the field, the stereo field was just beautiful, particularly when we had the +5 winds in those other arrangements. You could hear all the parts. That's what I liked about it, And his son Will Crain, Bill and Will Crain, they run BRC Audio Productions, and Will ran the sessions. I mean, he made sure that everything was set up. We did like a couple of sessions to one with the quintet to play our quintet tunes, and then we had one session where we had the +5 tunes. So the cats, we did our 4 tunes in one session, and then we did the 2 augmented tunes in another. So there were six on that album. And I have enough to do like 3 albums worth of standards. So this is volume 1, and I don't know, with everything going on, I don't know if we'll get to volume 2 or volume 3, because we're not working and playing, and with that kind of music and that kind of band, you have to. I don't care what people say, I mean, you have to really, you have to sincerely play together. The music has a relationship, and a lot of this stuff, and I know that I don't settle for certain things. I like to have different. I like to have different generations interacting, and I like to have different genders interacting where I can, because I like it to reflect reality. But the people I play with, I like them to be committed and scholarly toward the music and know what they're doing, and you can tell as soon as you sit down and play with someone that they're just dialing it in, making their $100 or something like that, because they don't know what they're doing, or they don't really prefer that music, and they don't really study it, so they don't understand what's going on and what their role is at any given moment or second, any given beat. The cats in my quintet, I mean, every beat of every measure, literally, I'm just mesmerized by what they do. The way they're always listening and interacting, and then they're all scholars. So they do understand all of the pieces, and then some of those things I've listened to all my life, and I know a lot about them, and they know just as much or more about them, So having the opportunity to play those and take those seriously and put our own little spin on them, I think that was one of the things that that truly was inspiring to me. So if that's the last album I do, I'm very proud of it. It's the best one that I've done, and I like all the albums I've done. But this one is standards, and it's a good document. Bill Crain said something to me, and then I'll be quiet a minute. Bill Crain said when I was shopping studios, and I had heard a lot about Bill Crain as a engineer and things like this, and I know he's a great musician, and we're friends. We've become really good friends. But I was always curious, why didn't more musicians go and record at his studio? And until I recorded there. And the reason I think that a lot of people don't go there is Bill's he's very informed, and he does not waste any time with anything that he has to say. If you're playing out of tune, he says, "Hey, Chris, that D's a little bit sharp. Watch that D." He'll just say that, right? And he's not saying it to attack you, but a lot of musicians, I could see how younger musicians or people with less experience and things like that, where they would be put off by the directness of it. Or, like if you're going along playing a take, and like on my arrangements, those are pretty tough arrangements. He'd just say, "Stop, nope, too many wrong notes. Too many wrong notes." We'd hear him through the headphone. He says, "There's nothing I can do with that. I can't even go in there and edit that. There's so many wrong notes." And so he said, "Hey, just take a few minutes, Chris, and work with the winds on that one section, because some of them are missing that." So I thought that was really brilliant, because they weren't experienced at going into a studio, most of them. Maybe Ariana Nabati, she played Barry sax on the stuff that I wrote. But the other three wind players, they weren't as experienced. My wife and Frida playing the flute, they had done Dino Moffa's record, so they were familiar with it. And Samantha on clarinet, a great clarinet player, who was a former student, by the way, and went on to KU in Washburn and got her education. But a brilliant musician, but never been in a studio like that. So basically having me go over those lines with them in the studio before we ran another take calmed them down. And Bill knew that. I didn't know that. I was just thinking like, oh, okay, well, what's going on here? They're good players. They were playing them before, what's happening? And that was it. They were a little bit nervous. And once they got a chance to go through things, they could hear through the headphones, and they saw that Bill wasn't going to bite their head off. I wasn't going to bite their head. Nothing bad was going to happen to them. They just settled in, and we were able to get a few good takes of those tunes to choose from. So what you hear on the album, I think, is the better ones, and I deferred to Bill on like the stereo feel that you hear and things like that, because that's what he does. With that many instruments, a quintet plus 5, that's a lot of things happening. And then I just think the guys played brilliantly. It was really, really, really nice, and they captured us really well. The microphones that guy's got, he's got a microphone for everything, for every instrument, every situation, and that's a massive investment. So enough of that, and I hope you didn't mind me talking about that, but I'm still pretty excited about it. We were supposed to release it, but at this point in my career, I'm not like trying to make my bones. If I haven't made them by now, I don't have any, in a sense, So
yeah,
it's like, okay, there were other projects, like we had the Bird Boot Camp, trying to see how to make that work with the situation that we were just talking about earlier with the pandemic and everything. And then we had the Casey Area Youth Jazz, trying to find a model or a practical thing that was safe. And thanks to a guy who was a friend of mine. Now he runs the West Point band, the military academy band at West Point, New York. He's Colonel Todd Addison. And they had mitigation demonstration, a tactic of what they were using to mitigate risk by using these plexiglass things. And the Army has a regulation for everything, so the Army had a regulation that they had figured out what would be safe and all of this for the Army band. So I used basically that and asked him, I said, hey, I want to use this. They said, that's why we put it up there, for everybody to see what we're doing. I said, well, I figured that, but I wanted to get permission before I did. So I got all that stuff, and I looked at it, and we modified it for the youth jazz kids, and that was successful. And we also used a version of that for the bird boot camp so we could celebrate Charlie Parker in the centennial of his birth year, you know. And then we had the youth jazz album from 2019 that still hadn't been released, and mine was in the queue after all of that, you know, after the youth jazz album. And after these projects, I said, Bill says, Chris, what do you want to do? So we'll do the kids album first, man. I mean, take your time, just do that and let mine wait. So I didn't have any hurry, you know, to get it out. And then once, you know, a few weeks ago, like a couple of weeks ago, Will contacted me by text and said, hey, Chris, I just sent you some mixes to listen to, some initial mixes to listen to. I'm saying, of what, you know? Because I was going, of what is this? Of this the youth jazz thing? He says, no, I've got some of those too, but I'm gonna of the 2020 youth jazz. He goes, oh no, I've got some of those, but this is of your album. I almost fell off my phone, you know. So, but I listened to it and I remembered all of it. I mean, it's really, really nice and really. I thought it came out really well. I don't know if you've had a chance to even listen to it yet.
Yes, I have. Yeah, and it sounds wonderful. And you know, the one thing that I've been thinking about everything that you said was all of these events that you've witnessed in your life, all of these things that have shaped who you are and have made you who you are, not only as a man but as a musician. And I think about as this pandemic has kind of roared on, I've talked to a lot of people about kind of innovation. Joe Lovano kind of set the tone for me when he was like, you know, a lot of these cats back in the day were really innovating when there was a lot of turbulence, between racial turbulence, between, you know, war happening and a lot of things happening. And I think about all of that. I had someone last week tell me when I asked them about innovation, they said, we need to look back. We need to go back to Louis Armstrong. We need to go back. These younger cats need to see what started and how it happened. So I think about you having an album, obviously during a very inflamed time in America. I don't know that we ever thought that we would go back to this kind of archaic Stone Age notion of how human beings, no matter what race, creed, or color we are, that we would treat each other this way again. I thought we were over that. I thought we moved past it. But when I think about the tapestry of this country and world and what we're going through, more specifically America, and the music that you've revisited, tell me how you think those two kind of match up.
Wow. That is very, very heavy, and I swear we never talked about this before this interview. I mean, that part of that was really within the thesis of this album, because after the 44th president, I just heard so many people thinking that we were post-racial, but I never bought into that. Do you know why I never bought into that? I'm a military kid, grew up as a military kid, did a military career myself. My kids are in the military, you know. And if you want to say a post-racial society, that's the closest thing we have, you know, because by law it's like they don't even cotton to anything that isn't a meritocracy. Now, our society, I've been out longer than I was in my own career as an adult man. Our society, it's the best country in the world, yes, but still, we've had that 50-50 divide that we had at the Civil War. It's just always been there, and they've been on the low-key thing, they've a down low, or whatever you want to call it. They just have not been vocal until we had the 45th president, who made it sort of okay for everybody to be unconventional or uncouth, or however you want to call that, to try to the paradigm had been shifted in that regard. So I'm not a person who thought all of that was over. My wife and I are a mixed couple, as you know, and we were married in the 70s. So we can still do it to this day. We can walk up together on someone, and instantly I can tell if they're cool with that or not. Black, white, it doesn't matter, you know. So we've always had this canary in the coal mine thing about that, and it served us well to know who was really sincere and who genuine and who wasn't. Now, nowadays, it's, you know, I can turn on TV and I see mixed couples depicted in commercials. That's cool. You know what I'm saying? We've come a long, long way.
Yeah.
But for us, for the enlightened people who are not wounded so bad that you blame other people for what you have or don't have, you know, the people who have evolved past that, I just don't think it's realistic to think that all the problems like that are solved, especially when you can drive down any city, large city or small city, large town, small town, whatever you want to call them, in any part of the country, and you can see people hurting and doing really poorly. And when most of the people who are in poverty are not minorities, you know, even though it seems like it's led to believe that it is that, you know, there's bound to be some anger, resentment, blowback, things like that. So I just think that I'm not advocating socialism here or whatever, but I think that we could do better in terms of ensuring that there is a way up for people, you know, in terms of there's a lot of work that people can have that we aren't even innovating to make happen. I mean, I learned that when I got out of the military and basically had to be a business person as a jazz musician. If I don't think of things to do, I won't work. You know, if I have to run around here to these 2 or 3 people that have venues and they're hiring their friends they've been hiring for the last 25 years or longer, I'm not one of those friends. I don't care how good my group is. There's not enough room for me. So I have to make my own, I have to innovate my own agenda. And I thought back, I said, well, we did the same thing in the military. I already know how to do this. I just need to do this if this is what I want to do. If I want to go work for someone else that's already done that and they give me a check in an office or a cubicle and then not have to put the effort in and all this, great, but I won't be a musician. So I decided that when we came back to Kansas City initially, I decided that I came back here to contribute something, not to necessarily take from the scene, because once I got out and saw what the civilian jazz scene in this era really is, you know, it was a reality check for me, because I'm one of those cats that were listening to albums. Me and Hamp were sitting in our room listening to albums, talking stories, reading album covers, buying the hype, thinking, man, we're stuck here in the military and these cats are out there doing this, that, the other. Those cats out there like alley cats making it, most of them, you know. And then when I got to Kansas City and I hooked up with Aladdin as a mentor, I wanted to find somebody a generation ahead of me who was a great musician and a great teacher, and I was blessed to have found Ahmed Aladdin. And he was gracious enough to let me come to his house for like 5 years every Wednesday for a master class in life and music. We ended up just hanging and playing tunes, you know. But when I first went there, it was like there was things I wanted to know. I paid him for lessons, you know. And one of the things that he really schooled me on was the reality. He was going like, no, man, no, it isn't like that. You know, he says, yeah, I can see how you could have that impression. But see, and then he said, you have to watch musicians, because musicians try to present that they're doing better than they are. And he said, one of the things I like about you, Chris, is people can go to your website and they look at your website, and then when they meet you in person and see your life, it's the same thing. And I never thought about that. But he noticed stuff like that. That's what cracked me up about him, man. He said, yeah, you're the same cat that I see on your website, you know? And I said, well, isn't that the way it's supposed to be? He says, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be, but most of the time it's not. You know, cats put on that they're doing better than they actually are. And I said, well, why do the gigs pay so little? Well, because the infrastructure, they're trying to build, they're trying to sell a product that's 70 years outdated. You know, they're not selling it the right way. They're not presenting it the right way. And then fast forward to today, the pandemic is having them kick and scream, dragging them into the 21st century by doing these live streams. Now, the next step they need to do is figure out how to really monetize that, rather than having people put their Venmo link on the thing or something like that and hope for tips. You know, once they do a payment gateway where people can buy a ticket and I can sit at home and say, okay, so-and-so's at the Blue Room, I want to check that out. So I'll pay my $20 or whatever, and we'll sit here at home and watch that, because I don't feel like driving there. I've had a hard day teaching or something like that. And once they figure that out, I think that we're in for another renaissance, in a sense, to give people a chance to play. But if you book it the way that you book your live venues now, it's going to be more of the same. I'm not going to want to see the same people over and over. Not when you've got enough people in Kansas City alone, where, you know, for 60 days I could see a concert of different people. You know, I don't want to see the same groups. Most of these cats, I've heard of them, you know, and there are cats here that I haven't seen or heard. Every 60 days I'd listen to them, but I wouldn't want to listen to the same people over and over again playing with a different leader. You know, it's like, okay, I mean, there's other drummers, there's other bass players, you know, there's other piano players that you can put to work here. And we haven't evolved like that. I mean, as an infrastructure in the jazz community, from what I have seen, and I'm 65, I can talk, I can say what I observe, and people can take it in context that, yeah, he's experienced, he's seen this, and, you know, he's nearing the end of his career, so he's basically able to observe objectively, you know, and for the good of the order, if you will. But I think it'll be another 5-10 years before some of the guard has to change out, if you will, because the mentality of what jazz is and what the jazz economy is entrenched in certain gatekeepers, and that's their vision. Their vision is still a 1940s, 50s live club model where they're selling drinks and all this stuff, and they're trying to use these different profit centers. And the reality is more like what they do at Lincoln Center, except they broadcast every night and let people buy tickets rather than just give it away for free, you know, in that sense. I mean, you could do that, give it away for free if you can afford to, but the ideal would be more a combination of what like Spike has up there at Smalls, where you can just buy a ticket and then see it, you know, rather than stream it poorly, stream it professionally like Lincoln Center does and pay $20 or $10 for the concert, and, you know, 50,000 people from around the world do that, and you make 10 times 50,000. People aren't thinking that scaling. They're not even thinking that way. I don't know. They just think right in front of their face, and that might be one of the things that really changes this music permanently from the music that's on that standards record. The motivation and impetus of those cats was societal And what I see in the music now is opportunity to present. That's the big thing, and to have a living wage doing it. Those guys back then, those ladies and gentlemen who were, who came from Bird, who came from Miles, and who came from all the people of Miles as sidemen, all of those people are the ones we're living off of right now. Art Blakey played with Bird, and Bobby played with Art Blakey, so technically he's a grandson of Bird's. There aren't many people like that. And the ones that come from that lineage, that association, however it's branched off in whatever vein they're on, they're the cats who are really the oxygen in the room, of modern jazz music right now. If you think Keith Jarrett, all those great piano players that came through Miles's band, Bill Evans, all those guys, they're still influencing the music right now. They're still doing that, and they're the ones that are alive. They're like in their 70s and 80s, things like this, So, and then their sidemen are the ones that are still keeping things going. It is, it's really beautiful that those people are doing that, but I don't think the way that the infrastructure is now, most people don't even realize that. You have people teaching jazz who don't even really look at it that way. They're looking at what scale you play over an altered dom chord, and teaching the latest licks, and they don't really know where that comes from, and they don't even really care in a sense. They think they're inventing something. Does that make sense? And there's nothing wrong with that, but that is really sort of a distortion field that blurs everything. And then you have the generation that, like 20 years ago, Bobby Watson came back and started teaching at UMKC, but people had been doing that kind of thing maybe 10 years before that, where it became the thing to do. So over the last 30 years or so, the really great artists knew that you could not solely make a living playing gigs. You had to do everything you could. Teaching was like the foundation, and then you played your choice gigs and things like that, and maybe got a record deal. A record deal wasn't supposed to make you any money. It was supposed to be like a business card and a document statement, and you lived off the advance. They didn't look at it for making money. And you'd hear them complaining about, Spotify only pays blah, blah, blah. And then the average musician who isn't a recording artist on that level, they don't understand the context of what those cats are saying. They were getting some money from those records, from the royalties, if they recouped their advance, after a few years or whatever of sales. They were getting some money from those royalties toward recoupment even, and they weren't getting that. But most average musicians, they didn't even know that level of business. So they would just glom on to whatever those heavy cats were saying just to be, Pete and repeat in a sense. But I just think that teaching became this big pillar stability thing if it wasn't an adjunct. If you had a professor chair where you were getting a salary, benefits, blah, 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 and then you were free to go perform, and you're mandated to do that and record and research that way, or sabbatical every once in a while and do that, tour. I think that became a thing, and it wasn't a thing back when that music that I recorded, it wasn't necessarily the thing. There were people who were teaching, Andrew Hill taught, Dr. Andrew Hill, but there were people who taught and things like that, but it wasn't really, it was more common to be able to play festivals, to tour, to play gigs, to make it, things like that. Because there were more opportunities, I think, particularly overseas in Europe. People would go to Europe. I remember when we were there in the 70s, late 70s to 1980, we could go to Munich every week, and there'd be some heavy American cat there playing at the Domicile, or before the Unterfahrt, it was the Domicile Jazz Club. And I saw Woody Shaw there when he had that you know, those two great albums that came out right around the time, 79, 80, the one that had Stepping Stone, all that stuff on that. And I also saw Dexter Gordon, saw Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, big band there. I mean, live in Munich, that album, and Bob Bowman was in that band. And I didn't even know who Bob Bowman was, and he was a young kid. I didn't even know who he was, you know. But come to find out that album that won the Grammy, I listened to Bob Bowman's on that, you know. And I said, man, I actually saw that. I actually saw them come and play, you know. So,
yeah,
you know, it was a whole different dynamic. And today can be even more dynamic. That's the thing that I see. You know, I'm one of those people, I don't see a glass half empty. I see it half full, and what can you put the rest of in the glass? I see now with the technology we have that you can do so many things. Like I teach my students using Zoom or Skype or even FaceTime if they don't have either of those platforms. And I've had some colleagues say, well, Chris, I just don't like doing that because you can't work on tone quality, blah, 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 blah. And I let them finish speaking. And then I say, well, yeah, you can't teach like you're teaching someone in person because, number one, you cannot duet with them. You cannot model in that way, but you can teach them. You can give like a clinic or master class on elements that you really wouldn't get to necessarily, at least I don't, over, 40, 50 years of teaching. I would not get to some of these things that I've been able to get to in these online lessons. The online lessons afford me to really get to details. Okay, are you using the proper technique? Do you really know these scales that you're playing? Do you really understand what the music is telling you to do? Can you play rhythms? What's going on here? And get you a chance to address that. I had, as an example, in March when they first locked everything down, around that time they made the kids come home from school. They locked down all the activities, and I kept all of my students online. And I have some good students at my studio, but I have 2, 3, 4 of them are very gifted on various instruments. And with kids like that, they're gifted in a lot of things, or they're in a lot of things. So, if you can keep them focused, they make progress. And I was able to do that for the most part. So they had some kind of success. But the type of success that you and I are talking about are like students that I've had in the past that I've worked with, Houston Smith, Morgan Fall, the kids that if you point them, they come back and they've lapped what you had them do 3 or 4 times, and they're just excited to show you what they discovered, Most kids aren't like that. Those kids like Houston Smith and Morgan Fall, none of us can really take credit for them individually. All of us have poured into them, and other people have poured into them, and they're going to get it. They're like we were growing up. We were going to get it no matter what. Now, there's other kids who have that kind of talent or potential, but you have to guide them. They have to focus on the music. Something complex as jazz. There's one kid that I'm speaking about. He's applied to the conservatory, and I think he's going to get in with no problem. And over that pandemic, as an example, Joe, we were able to address certain things, certain factors in his playing. It wasn't a matter of understanding. It was the conceptualization of things that now he understands, and he plays like Morgan in Houston now. I mean, he understands what's going on. He knows enough language that when you hear him play, you're going like, okay, yeah, he can play. And then his sound, he straightened out his sound, and how we did that. And I tried several things with him. I tried modeling with him, in-person lessons, and that didn't work because after the lesson, he'd forget, and then he'd come back doing the high school things that he was doing with the tone and all that. I was going, no. So what I did is I got a bunch of Charles McNeil's transcriptions of great alto players, and I'd send him the PDF, and I'd send him the YouTube link, and I'd say, play along with this. And I had him do that like 3 weeks in a row. And when the third week of doing that was over, he says, "Oh, Mr. B, I got it. I think I understand what you're doing. I got it." And he started playing. I'm going, "Whoa, that sounds like Vince Herring. Whoa, that sounds like Cannonball." Just that inflection. You get the inflection. You get the physical thing that you have to do to make that speak that way. And he was going, "Yeah, I understand what you're saying now." And I grew as a teacher by showing him that it worked. And I was going like, "Oh, okay, that's another touchstone that I can't do without using an exemplar like that." Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Well, and this kid is playing, and you know, hopefully he'll be at the conservatory. He has that audition coming up, but he's going to crush everything they have him play. I mean, this guy knows he knows quote unquote jazz theory better than I did when I graduated from high school. I was a good player, you know, and I had good teachers and things like that. But he understands. He looks at tunes like I do. I taught him to analyze what he's facing, how many scale key areas that he's facing in each tune. And he can do that like I do. If I have a chart in front of me and I've never played it before and I have a solo coming up, I can look at the changes and see what I'm supposed to be doing. And so it doesn't matter when I get there, you know, I can play something coherent. He is the same way. And younger and quicker. I mean, and more energy. He's still at the point where he's playing a million notes. I'm not doing that anymore. I used to do that, but yeah, I think you just grow out of that. You just like it becomes a whole different thing. Like I use the whole palette. I use every instrument in my solos. So every note I play is interacting with every note that's happening. And before it was like, okay, I'm playing all of this stuff. You guys hang on and catch on to me. He's at that stage. He's playing a zillion notes, and it sounds cool. You know, you can hear all of the. You can hear, it just tickles me. It cracks me up. You know, you hear players like that all the time. I mean, and to me, it's like I just get tickled when I hear the younger guys do that because I remember being there, and it's like, look, I figured this out. Look, I can do this. I can do that. Whoa, 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 whoa! Look at that! Look at this! And it's just so great to see that joy. That's the way I would. And that's one of these things that this music can only this music can really give you that type of interaction that's beyond words. And it's so objective that sometimes it makes you speechless because there aren't very many things that are so objective like this. You know, I think honestly we have so many factors through jazz, and I'm sure you've thought of this probably as long as you've been in this. You know, there are so many things that jazz can touch in people's lives. Not like pop music. I'm not talking pop music. Pop music, for the most part, is angsty. It's like pure angst and not very much substance. It's a hook. It's meant to reach a certain person at the beginnings of going through this passage to adulthood. Jazz is adult music. Jazz is music that will sustain you for the rest of your life, and still you can listen to, you can listen to Kind of Blue, you can listen to Giant Steps, you can listen to any Keith Jarrett album. You can listen to that for the rest of your life and still get something new at each listen. You know, that's one of the things that Bill Crain said to me. He said, "Chris, I want to make an album that people will want to listen to again and again, that sounds so good that when they hear it, it gives them something every time they listen to it." He says, "That's what I go for." And that's what sold me on going to his studio with this album, because doing a standards album, man, that is daunting. You know, everybody's played those tunes. Well, a lot of the tunes that I play, I notice people don't play them because they don't really teach them like that in school, if that makes sense. Those are hard. Those are difficult, or they're challenging because they don't go the conventional thing where you can hook up these licks, these string these licks together. And the people I had playing were all master musicians. So when you hear Stan Kessler rip through dolphin dance changes like he's playing blues, you know, you think, oh, that isn't too difficult, or but you hear his lines are not cliche lines. The lines that are navigating those changes and seamlessly, and he's doing it musically and artistically. But when you look at the chart, you go, oh, Lord, look what he did. You know, look how easy he made that sound, and I see what he actually navigated there. But that's the beauty of that music. That's the depth of that music that we all leave out. I mean, there's more than the 2 or 3 composers that you always hear people studying and playing and citing. You know, Ben Golson. I mean, holy smokes, Stablemates, that tune. You know, I want to do that tune. But see, you have to address that music the way that we did seriously, because those guys in my band, they're so busy that really trying to get them together for a rehearsal, that's not going to happen. You know, we can say, let's rehearse, and no, then somebody's always got something. You know, even if it's a paid rehearsal, so you can't even say that, oh, you need to pay them, Chris. Well, no, I will pay them, but they just don't have time to do that because they're in such demand in other aspects of their life. They're all family men. They're all educators. They all have their projects, and they're all leaders in their own right as well. So what we used that Black Dolphin, and John Scott was just gracious enough to let me have the first Saturday that entire year when he was still trying to flesh out Black Dolphin. He didn't know what he was going to do with it. And then we just and that was my agenda. I was grateful to do that. Yeah, we were getting paid, but I was grateful to have a time where I could see, you know, kick the tires and see what we had there. And then having artists of that experience and that caliber, and they're just great guys too. They're nice people. I mean, they're good humans. And to have those cats, and after about 2 or 3 of those gigs, they saw what I was trying to do, and they bought into it. You know, I didn't shuffle the band too much, you know, but they saw what I was doing. They saw my vision, you know, and they bought into it, 100% buy-in, and they gave me what they could sincerely. And then once they started doing that, it was really, really just a lot of fun, you know.
Yeah.
You know, 3 hours of fun over there. So
absolutely.
I think that we have an opportunity here with all of this. I don't see things as doomsday, if that makes any sense. I see things, yeah. I see what if. Like, I watch what you've done over this pandemic, and I think you've done more interviews. And then you've done interviews with so many diverse range of people from all over. A lot of you mentioned Joe Lovano, man. I mean, yeah. Cats like that. I mean, you're all over the place helping the scene. I honestly believe that we have to think outside of the paradigm that you come up thinking through high school, college, and then you get out in the world, you think it's this and it's not. We have to think like right now, I have a group on Facebook. Now I'm digressing a little bit, but not very much. I promise. I have a group on Facebook called Chris Burnett Listener Network. Now that goes back to the early 1990s of MP3.com days, where I had a Yahoo group of fans. Like, that was my mailing list. You know, and people wanted to hear my music because they heard it on MP3.com. They're from all over the country. Some of those people in that group, I've been connecting with them online since 1990s. You know, so 25 years, what is that? Yeah. So now I've got like 837 people in that group. And when I put out an album or I put out a single, guess what? Almost 800 people will spend 99 cents or whatever for that album, or that they'll do that because I've been there. I don't need 1 million people to buy, you know, a $15 album. If I have 500 of that 800 people buy a $15 album, you see how I recoup, don't you? And I think that's what should be taught. If everyone who is on the artist path cultivates relationships with this music and their vision, and there's people out there that will buy into it or are simpatico to it, you know, you can sustain yourself, and then you can sustain a career. And it's microscopic Pat Metheny, you know, because I watched Pat Metheny do that. You know, that's where I learned. I was going, man, this cat, not only is he great as a musician, but he was doing social media before there was a social media. If you think about it, he was like the very first of the major artists to be online. I saw that. I was going like, holy crap, him and Joshua Redman. Because I remember those two's websites, and I was going, holy smokes. And then, you know, Joshua Redman builds his own website. That's how genius he was. That's why I started learning how to write code. I was going, man, look at this cat's website. Holy smoke. And he did this. He wrote this code back in those days, you know. So, I don't know. Watching those guys, if you want an example of how to make a living in the music, Pat Metheny isn't waiting for somebody to give him a gig. You know, he isn't waiting for that. He's creating his stuff. That's the model. Chick Corea's the same way.
Yep.
Miles Davis was the same way.
Take advantage of the opportunities that you have, absolutely. And Chris, you've nailed everything that I really wanted to kind of arc around and cover during this pandemic and the album. Thank you for the music. Thank you for being an ambassador. Good luck with everything, and I can't wait to see you live and all of the cats live when this revival kicks back in, hopefully this year.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for everything that you're doing sincerely, man. Not because you're interviewing me. I mean, you're doing a big deal. So thank you very much.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and practitioners in Leavenworth, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Christopher for being such a friend of the jazz community and of us here at Neon Jazz, and for his music and time. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.